Hello. Welcome back to my channel. I am Monae and you are watching Life is Monae. Boy, do I have some updates for you guys. As you all know, if you've been following my channel, we've been doing this thing where we go through different genres and I try to find new favorites in them. And I have done thrillers, I have done sci-fi, both adult and YA set in space. And more recently, I decided to try to jump into the romance genre, and it has been a journey thus far. My shelves look completely different. I know that you guys can see that I have way more additions over here, and all of those have to do with my experience reading romance. And so I'm going to update you guys on that. There is going to be 2 separate videos where I talk about my experience reading what I deem to be contemporary romance, and then my experience with paranormal romance, which has been entirely different. And so in this video, we're going to talk about my experiences outside of paranormal romance. If you guys watch this video up here, then you have seen me when I was on the hunt for romance books. I went to the library, I went to Half Price Books, I went to Barnes & Nobles, and I grabbed a couple of romance books. Most of them I have read in addition to others, but some of them I have not. And so we're just going to run through the romance books that I have read, and make sure you guys check out the paranormal romance video, because I have been having a grand time with paranormal romances and it has been eating me up. I cannot put them down, and it's just been a journey. And so make sure you guys check that video out, because I have so much that I want to update you guys on. But let's get started. I probably should have watched that vlog again where I was shopping for romance books, because I don't remember exactly what I got. Like, that vlog was filmed maybe a month and a half before it went live, and at this point it's probably about to be a month old. So it's been a few months since I started reading romance books. So I'm gonna go off the top of my head and see what we come up with. I know the first thing that I ended up grabbing was From Lukov by Mariana Zapata. That was a DNF. I don't have the book with me because I ended up checking it out from my library, but I definitely returned that. The main character, honestly, was a jackass. I didn't have a problem with the writing. I didn't have a problem with the way the romance was set up. The main character was really just a jackass to me. So when the main character started talking about how much she hates this guy and why she hates him, how long she hates him, everything was going kind of fine. I was like, okay, whatever, this is a hate to love romance, that makes sense. But when she explained the reason behind, like, the moment that she decided to hate him, I was just like, are you serious? Like, this, you've been holding a grudge for like a decade over something so small. I couldn't deal with it. Like, it was terrible. I do have another book by the author that I have not read yet, and I'll put it here. I've been told that I may like this one a little bit better. Most of the romances that she writes, I believe, are centered around sports, because From Lukov was centered around ice skating. This one is centered around football. So I know that they're going to be sports centered, but that wasn't what bothered me. It wasn't the writing. It wasn't the premise. It wasn't even the hate to love romance. It was just that I cannot read from a main character who I consider to be a dickwad. And so, yeah, we're going to try that book, and I'll update you guys on what I felt from there. The second book that I ended up grabbing in that library haul, I remember, is Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry. And I love this book so much. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was so cute and fun. In this book, we follow this main character named Quinn. Quinn is a black girl who goes to kind of like a predominantly white school, and this is her senior year before she goes off to college. And she has a lot on her plate, a lot of anxiety, social anxieties, and just things that worry her, to the point where she's trying to figure out coping mechanism. And so one of her coping mechanisms is to write in a notebook a list of things that she wants to get off her chest that she would probably never say out loud, like the list of boys that I would marry, kill, or have sex with, or the list of things I could never admit out loud, or just a list of reasons why I won't see my grandmother before she passes because she has Alzheimer's. It's just, she copes with a lot of the things that's happening in her life through writing out lists. She has friends over one day and her journal gets mixed up. So she believes that there's kid at her school named Carter actually has this journal, but somehow he ends up losing it as well, and then someone ends up blackmailing her and telling her that if she doesn't complete the list of things she needs to do before graduation, that they're going to release the entire notebook. And so she has to complete different things on the list as she tries to figure out who has her journal, and she has to work with Carter because he's the last person who had her journal, and she's still not even sure if he's the one who's blackmailing her or not. So you follow Quinn as she tries to placate this blackmailer by doing some of the more confrontational or things that she can actually confront on her list, all the while trying to figure out who has her list. And there's secrets that she actually needs to deal with. She has a grandmother who is kind of dying, and she has dementia or Alzheimer's, and she finds love along the way, of course, because it is a romance book. But I just really connected with Quinn, and one of the things that I like about this book is that most of the times when we have a main character who is a person of color who's in a white community, it's kind of hard to portray them in a way that everyone can kind of understand them without there being like this social disconnect between them and their blackness. Quinn is a black girl, and she absolutely knows that, but she has a world where she has to exist with white friends. And I just feel like this is the perfect POV where you get to understand a character who's like, I know that my friends feel very comfortable around me, around saying certain things around me, but I'm actually not okay with it. I don't know why they look at me and think it's okay to say certain things, but it's definitely not. And so I don't want to give away too much, but this book was definitely fun. I did really enjoy Quinn. I really enjoyed Carter. I really enjoyed their dynamic, but I also enjoyed Quinn's journey, and I highly recommend if you're into YA romances. I have not read a lot of YA romances. Actually, I think that might be one of the only one or two YA romances I've read, but that was definitely a win, and I do recommend. The next book that I got in that haul that I remember getting is the the intimacy experiment. That was also fun. In the intimacy experiment, we followed this character named Naomi as well as a character named Ethan. Naomi was a sex worker in her younger days, and now she's kind of turned her past as a sex worker into something that has to do with like sex positivity. And what she wants to do is go around to different universities and schools and teaching sex positivity to youth and what it means to have a healthy sex life and how not to be afraid of it, not to be afraid of asking for what you want. She's pretty much just this badass female character that makes no apologies for her past. She has no problem with how people see her because her decisions are her own and she takes no crap from nobody. We have this character named Ethan as well, who is a rabbi at a synagogue, and he's trying to come up with different ways to attract more young people to his synagogue because it is kind of like most of his congregation is older and there's not a lot of people and there's not any new Jewish people coming in, and so he's trying to come up with different ways to attract a younger crowd. He decides to partner up with Naomi, giving her a platform to teach her sex positivity classes to because she's been turned down time after time again by universities. And so he decides that if they create a sex positive seminar in a synagogue, it will help the youth come in and be able to talk about the things that are going on in the world today and how to date in this world, how to have sex in this world. And it's about more than just sex, just about how to have intimate relationships with someone and the expectations that you set up around that at the synagogue, and hopefully showing people that churches and synagogues and religion in total can adapt to the modern world. So it's kind of like killing two birds with one stone. But as they're teaching these classes, a romance brews between Ethan and Naomi. And of course the synagogue members feel some type of way because we have a Jewish rabbi who is able to date whoever he wants, but he wants to date a ex-sex worker. And she grew up Jewish herself, but she has not been involved in the Jewish community in a long time. So you kind of follow them as they balance this very delicate relationship that they have. And I love Ethan. I love Naomi. They were so fun to watch. This is kind of smutty. There is some very spicy romance in there. And don't think that just because Ethan is a rabbi that he is going to be not forthcoming, because that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about this book, is that Ethan is not afraid to take control. He makes no apologies for his religion, and he is definitely adaptable in the modern world and modern society. It was just fun to watch them, and I highly recommend this book as well. This one was fun. I also ended up reading Beach Read by Emily Henry. I did not enjoy this one pretty much at all. I did not like the main character. I think her name was June, July, Fall. What's her name? January. So yeah, January is a younger woman who recently finds out after her father has passed that he had an affair on her mother, and she meets the mistress. She's dealing with all of the blowback from finding out that her father was not exactly who she thought he was, and also dealing with missing him and mourning him because he has recently passed. And she's also having writer's block with her trying to write her newer book. So she takes kind of like a small vacational trip to her father's beach house. At this vacational home, she runs into an ex-college classmate, and he is a writer as well, and they have like this hate to love kind of romance between them because they don't really like each other, or she definitely doesn't like him. And so he also has things going on in his life that he's trying to deal with, and he's having writer's block himself, and so they decide to kind of help each other write one another's books. And he's definitely more of a grumpy kind of guy, and she's very like sunshiny, so all of her books are like romantic and they end in happiness, and he's definitely more on the darker side. So it's more of a challenge for them to see each other's point of view and write from the other's perspective, and there is a romance that does brew between them. I just found that January was a little too inexperienced and naive for Gus, because her finding out that her father wasn't a perfect man in his marriage pretty much shattered her world. And so she used to live in this bubble of like perfect love and happiness and no heartbreak and nothing being sad ever. And again, finding out that her father was not the perfect husband. And then Gus is actually dealing with a divorce himself. So his own marriage has kind of fallen apart. And I just felt like there was a disconnect here between what he's dealing with and what she's dealing with. And I at times found that like a lot of her dialogue and how she felt about certain things was honestly very childish. And I understand that she's been in a bubble her entire life, that's fine, but I don't see how her and Gus met in the middle. And I don't believe that they're like gonna be this perfect couple even after the book ends. Like I feel like when you end a book and you end a romance, you should expect that like they're gonna be able to stand the test of time, they're gonna be able to take challenges take challenges head on and face them together, and more than likely, hopefully, they end up overcoming them. As a married woman myself, I feel like the relationship that they ended up in is on rocky grounds, and I feel like it's going to be even more rocky when they actually get started in like the life of a married couple and like what that means to be married. So I was honestly not sold on the romance, and so I did not end up enjoying this as well. And I also felt like January's dialogue was a lot of self-pity and just honestly annoyingness, so didn't love this one as much. But I did read People We Meet on Vacation, and that was a banger. Definitely enjoyed that book. In People We Meet on Vacation, we follow Poppy and Alex. Poppy has always wanted to be kind of like this person, this blogger who travels to different parts of the world and kind of writes about her experiences, and never really staying in one place. She definitely wants to travel. She ended up leaving college to pursue her dream as like this traveling blogger. And her best friend Alex is someone who is not as spontaneous and out there as she is, but they kind of develop this thing in their relationship where whenever she goes on these trips, they go together. So you're kind of following them in the past, different vacations that they've taken together. But in the present timeline, they haven't talked to each other in about 2 years. They haven't gone on vacation with each other in about 2 years. And so as you're reading this book, you're wondering what happened in the past to make them lose this really great friendship that they had. And so Poppy suggests that they go on another vacation in the present time. And so you kind of follow the present timeline vacation as well as the past vacations until everything comes to a head. I believe this does count as like a second chance kind of romance and a friends to lover kind of romance, so that was fun for me. I did enjoy both characters. I thought that the romance was so sweet, and I'm willing to give Emily Henry another shot because I read 2 books from her. One I liked, one I didn't really like, and so I do plan to read the new release that she has scheduled for next year, I believe, just to see. This is an author I want to stick with. I don't have a problem with her writing. I don't have a problem with her setup or anything like that. It's just I did not like January's POV, but I did really enjoy Poppy, and I believed in their romance. I was sold on their romance, and so that was a fun time. Another romance that I recently read is going to be The Ex-Hex. The Ex-Hex is a very short book. It's short and simple. It's a very quick read. It's not the best romance ever, but I did find it to be kind of fun. We have this witch named Vivian, and she is heartbroken one night after finding out that this guy that she's been dating throughout the summer, that she really, really likes, Reese, is betrothed to another girl. And so she gets so upset, she breaks up with him. And as she's having like this drunk night, her and her cousin are having some fun, and they decide to like kind of put this fake hex on him, and they don't take it seriously, but of course something happens to where the hex actually becomes a real thing. And so 10 years in the future, Reese is this member of a very powerful family who has founded this town where Vivian lives. And so he comes on the night of kind of like before Halloween to charge the town lines with magic, because that's what his family does every quarter century, I believe. And so when he's there, all these bad things start happening to him, and Vivian is unsure if the night that she put this fake hex on him that she wasn't even trying to do for real is what is actually causing the bad things to happen with him. And so they have to kind of work together to figure out the mystery of if her hex was actually even a real thing, or if something more ominous is happening in the town. And so this is also going to be a second chance romance, which I am learning that I do like. I like the idea of my characters having like a past history and trying to see them overcome and try again at love after kind of failing the first time. I do enjoy those. So if you have any really good second chance romance recommendations, put them in the comment section below, because that's a trope that I'm here for. Again, it's very short. It reminded me of like Bewitched, Hocus Pocus, Halloween Town, because they're like Halloween Town High, because there is a college where they do teach magic. It kind of has like those nostalgic, spooky Halloween like childhood vibes if you were a child who watched those kinds of movies growing up, or TV shows kind of growing up. And so yeah, it wasn't like mind-blowingly amazing, but I thought it was cute and to the point. And there is a lot of oral sexual things happening in this book by way of Reese, and I enjoyed that. I loved the idea of a woman getting her rocks off. So the second to last romance book that I have read outside of my paranormal is going to be It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. And it was such a sad book. It was such a tragic book, but I ate it up. I love tragedy. If you've been watching my channel, you know I love sad stuff. I love stuff where like people are not always happy, or there's a heavy amount of like trauma or pain. I like that in my fantasy books, and I have learned that I definitely like that in my romance books. Now this one is a very heavy hitter. There is a heavy amount of domestic violence in this book, because we have this one character who her mother suffered domestic violence growing up, and so she has this deep-seated hatred towards her father, and honestly like a misunderstanding around her mother for staying in such a terrible marriage for so long. And so we follow her as she gets married and has a kid, and her husband ends up being abusive as well. There is a childhood friend who kind of went off. They went their separate ways after something very tragic happened in the past, and so there is a reconnect from them. And no shock here, it is another second chance romance. I ate it up. I had a fun time with it. But more than that, I felt like Colleen Hoover did a really good job of portraying what it is like to be in a domestic violence situation, especially from the POV of the child, and what it's like as a child to witness domestic violence, because there's an understanding around the effects that it has on the woman or whoever is in the domestic situation, but not many people talk about what it's like for the child and how they feel about it, because they're not so caught up in the mental psyche and the mental hold that may be on the person who's being abused. So them not being able to understand why they're witnessing what they're witnessing, I feel like she did a really good job of really tackling what that is like. And also there is a child in this book who is homeless, and so it's not as easy or as simple as just put them in a homeless shelter, or just send them to a group home, or just send them home to their parents. Like, there are things that are set up in our society that is not as simple to fix. And so I feel like Colleen Hoover, I don't know what she's experienced in her past. I do know that, like, I read the author's note at the end of this book, and she mentioned that her mother was actually in a domestic violence relationship, and it was by the hands of her father, and how she was raised with a stepfather, and like what that was like for her. And a lot of the moments in the book are based off real events that her mother experienced at the hands of her father, and I feel like that really came through in the book. It wasn't her just writing someone else's story. It was from a personal experience, and so that made it a lot more realistic without having to make it melodramatic or overly drawn or overly done or like super exaggerated. It was just, it came across the page exactly how it would in real life. And so I did enjoy the book, even though it was a sad one. I just feel like it was definitely well done, and it was handling topics that are tough to talk about in a very well done way. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I recently bought Ugly Love, and I do have Verity that I know I purchased in that vlog, so I haven't read any of those two yet, but I am looking for more things from Colleen Hoover because, again, I do like sad stuff, but if she keeps covering tough topics in the way that she does, I'm definitely going to be a fan. I did try to read Desperate Measures by Katie Roberts, which I guess it's more of like an erotica than a romance, but that book was utterly terrible. I ended up DNFing it, and I will never read from Katie Roberts again. Just wanted to throw that in there. And the last romance that I ended up reading was The Unhoneymooners, and I thought that this was so funny. I listened to this book on audio, and so if you are going to read it, I highly suggest the audio book. So in this book, we have Olive, who is the sister of a bride, and we have Ethan, who is the brother of a groom. And at the wedding for their siblings, everyone gets food poisoning except the two of them. And so the bride and the groom are unable to take their honeymoon, and so they don't want to waste the trip because it was like a free trip that they won through like a sweepstakes or something like that. And so they kind of force Olive and Ethan to go on a trip together, even though they have a very large dislike for one another. As they're on this vacation, both of them run into someone, and they have to kind of sell this story of them being a married couple together. And so there is a level of like close forced proximity and like a fake marriage and a hate to love, if those tropes sound interesting to you as well. I am shocked that people didn't like this book because I definitely thought it was funny. Again, I had a very good time, and I found their bicker with one another to be entertaining. I will say that there was a certain level of like Olive believed that she was disliked for her size, or a certain level of like fat shaming that I don't feel like was addressed or really written about properly. She just went on this whole rampage of assumptions that he didn't like her because of her size, and she kept alluding to it throughout the entire book, but he never understood what she meant, and so he never addressed it. And I feel like if you're trying to call someone fat, it's very clear, and if you're talking to someone about calling you fat, that's also very clear. And so I don't know why both characters were being obtuse about the situation. I don't know, that was just very weird. Wasn't really a fan of that. Other than that, definitely enjoyed the book. That's just, you know, it was weird. So those are all of the romance books outside of the paranormal genre that I have read, and some I liked. I realized that the more that I learn about my taste, the more I can gauge whether or not I'm going to like a romance book. A lot of these books I went into completely blind, and so it was pretty hit or miss for the most part. I have learned that I'm not afraid to DNF a romance. If I'm not feeling the relationship, if I'm not sold on the love story, I'm definitely hopping off the boat on that aspect. A couple more romance books that I need to read, and a couple of more authors that I want to read more from, and so I'll be sure to give an update on that as well. But if you've been following me on my finding new favorites journey, I hope you guys have been having fun. I hope you've been enjoying this experience. I know I have. I'm learning so much more about my taste. I'm almost at the point where like I'm ready to get back to reading fantasy again. However, again, paranormal romance will not let go of me. I'm stuck and I cannot go anywhere. And make sure you guys watch that video because I have so much I need to talk about. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.